Okay, greetings and welcome to another Grenfell MediaWatch update. Today's edition is called Ask Not What You Can Do for Your Government. And the biggest topic of the last few weeks when it comes to Grenfell has clearly been about the publication of the report. Now, even though Brexit didn't happen on Halloween, there was the announcement that we'll be going into general election, and this has really dominated much of the news broadcast. Now, unfortunately, the report was leaked, and the focus, as we pretty much predicted, has been on what's been described as an indefensible hour of chaos by the firefighters. Now, despite all this, there has been some good news. Legal minds have actually said that there is potential for there to be some prosecutions in phase 2. The phase 1 report was actually making it clear that there was a level of illegality in the fact that the construction of the facade of Grenfell Tower was actually a breach of housing regulations. So we know that the law was broken. The question is, who by? Now, there were many recommendations that came from this phase, the most obvious being national government guidance on the stay put policy that needs to be revised immediately. The fire doors that were designed for compartmentalisation must work. Firefighters need to be trained and retrained. Lines of communication that take place during such incidents must be improved. And there were many other recommendations. I think there was around 6 that have been outlined by a report by the LSE, or it's published by the LSE, which makes for really good, clear and easy to digest reading. I haven't actually read the whole report yet. I've just gone through the executive summary. But that's not the end of the story, because you see, we are in an election phase right now, and that means that politicians get up to a lot of politicking, as I call it. And what they do is kind of like promise everything because they're so desperate to get another 5 years in power. And so what happened a few days after the report, the government was caught with its pants down when it revealed that Ryden, this is the contractor that was responsible, or one of the contractors that was responsible for the cladding on Grenfell, was actually on an approved list of contractors to work on publicly funded high-rise buildings. Now, government ministers are duplicitously blaming the EU for their inclusion on the list. Now, we know this is not true because the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, even though he's facing criticism and called for him to actually fire the London Fire Chief, Danny Cotton, has actually said, Ryden, no, you cannot use public funds, not in London anyway, to actually do some more work on high-rise buildings until we have concrete evidence from the inquiry that you're actually in the clear. And that's what a responsible politician would actually do. Sadly, one of the other negative aspects of actually being inside an election period during this kind of situation is we have comments from politicians like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who, sitting together with Nick Ferrari, kind of expressed their sense of innate superiority, their supremacy over Grenfell residents. And what's really important isn't just the focus that the media made on Jacob, but also Nick's silence as they sat there debating whether race and class was an issue, which clearly it was. There was a component of that in what happened at Grenfell. And we can see that as the situation got far worse when Andrew Bridgman was ruled out by the government to actually defend his colleague. And he too reaffirmed this idea that those who lord it above us are somehow intellectually superior than us. And we actually want to be ruled and governed by this elite. But if the innate snobbery and bigotry of Ferrari, Brigden and Rees-Mogg was a distraction, then one of the things that's useful to note is that the royals actually came out, and actually William was actually there with his wife, highlighting the fact that the response from the institutions that are charged to protect us, to help us, the ones that we pay for, the ones that we are part of, actually failed. And this is quite refreshing in a time when normally we don't hear much from the royals when it comes to these kind of issues. Now, the government, forced on the back foot, were forced into a desperate tit-for-tat engineering stunt, and they've actually announced, or the media has actually announced, that they've engaged in a U-turn about Ryden's ability to bid for these contracts. Of course, it's not a U-turn, because a tweet, which is how it was announced, is not, as far as I'm concerned, government policy. It's not enforceable by law. But it looked good, didn't it? It looked like you had a government that was listening, while riding in exactly the same position and maintaining cover and radio silence, because they know how toxic they are as a brand. So where's that leave us, especially in the calls for justice? Well, the estate agent Haslam was fined £30,000 for selling property which had Grenfell style cladding on it. And to their credit, they kind of recognised their error and started making concessions and changes to their policy to make sure it wouldn't happen again. But of course, we're starting to see the results of the campaign by Grenfell United and Justice for Grenfell and all the other organisations, raising awareness of the fact that people have a right to be safe in their own homes. Talking about their own homes, out of 201 households that were affected by Grenfell, I think there's around 9 that are still left in hotels or temporary accommodation. So the wheels of justice, even when it comes to rehousing, seem to have stalled. I think it's important to recognise the words of Ed Darfin. He says that the fire was not an accident. And if phase 2 is to mean anything, it has to find out who was responsible for that fire. And that's when we can really talk about justice without doing the word lip service. So I'm going to close here in a sunny Wareham on a cold winter's day. I wish you well and say may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.